course, it was always that. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt, for example, started Social Security for the same reason that Bismarck started Social Security, to try to fool regular people into thinking that, the government was on their side. Meanwhile, they're picking their pockets and strangling their lives and their families and so forth. So it's always been a ripoff for the big guys. I mean, why would anybody think it's otherwise? I mean, are we really supposed to think that regular people have the influence that George Soros or Warren Buffett or the rest of these creeps have? I mean, it's like a naive view of democracy. In fact, I would argue that the great achievement of democracy, from the standpoint of the regime, is that it disguises, makes everybody so that Americans so naively, and I would argue stupidly, refer to the government as we. Should we invade Libya? Should we go to the moon? Should we, it's not we. The government is a separate entity. It's a parasite that lives off society. It's the most dangerous parasite in the world. After all, the U.S. government is the biggest, richest, most powerful government ever to exist by many magnitudes. And it's killed millions of people. It has no hesitation in shutting down a little girl's lemonade stand, feeling up people at the airports, which, by the way, they do to make us, to humiliate us and to make us feel that we have no control and we have to do whatever they say. That is the purpose of the feel-ups at the airport. It has nothing to do with quote-unquote security. And in fact, I tend to think the whole war on terror has its, as you guys do, has its chimerical aspect to it. But that's not. It's not because they're afraid of some swarthy Arab guy coming in. It's to oppress, control, humiliate us, and even taking off your shoes is an old technique from the CIA interrogation manual. It humiliates somebody to take your shoes off, to be in your bare feet. So that's why they do it. It's not because of no other country in the world makes people take their shoes off. I mean, it's our enemy, the state. At Washington, D.C., forget bin Laden or all the rest of these guys. The enemy is in Washington, and that's why Ron Paul runs not for glory, not for power, not for control. He runs to dismantle the apparatus in Washington. He wants to stop the wars, stop the counterfeiting of the Fed, stop the rip-offs for the big banks and the big corporations, stop the rip-offs for big pharma, allow people to have the vitamins, just to take one issue that he introduced a bill about today, allow people to take the vitamins and minerals they want. The FDA, which is an adjunct of the big pharmaceutical companies, is on another tear about outlawing, or at least making us go pay some rip-off price to a doctor, a government-approved doctor, to be able to get vitamins and minerals we want. What an outrage. I mean, again, this is, Nazi or Soviet kind of stuff. And so we're living in a very dangerous time. On the other hand, there's more and more opposition from the American people. And, of course, Ron Paul is gathering that opposition, focusing it, and scaring the pants off the establishment. So it's very exciting. And we just have, I would say, even more exciting times ahead.
Well, we're coming up on the break right now. We'll have more with you on the other side. But where do you see this going as the NFL starts to adopt pat-downs, as we see bus and train stations patting people down, as we see shopping centers starting to get ready for TSA-style security? What does that say about the fascist government? And how do we say no when the people have already said no to the TSA?
Well, it's very ominous. And, of course, if the whole terrorist threat were what they say it was, long ago somebody would have blown up a mall or a ticket counter at an airport or whatever. Whether there's none of this is all designed to make us, the cattle, the cash cows, subservient to them. So I hope thank goodness we can buy online. We don't maybe have to go to the mall, but it's it's a horrendous thing for already American retailing is in trouble economically. This is a depression, so they're going to make it more difficult for customers to go shop. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, of course, it'll kill business. We'll be back in just a few. We're in our last segment here with Lew Rockwell of LewRockwell.com, talking about all things politics, all things the dollar, all things the Federal Reserve. And before we get more into the dollar and the quantitative easing, Lew, I wanted to ask you this. How can Ron have the most positive effect? We know you and Alex have discussed, can Ron Paul win? And, of course, if it weren't a rigged game, easily. Even with the rigged game, he's still dominating all these polls. We don't know yet what's going to happen once it moves into actual elections. But he's raised the Federal Reserve issue, made a lot of headway on that, been campaigning nationally since at least 2007 on the economic issue. He's gained so much credibility. And meanwhile, we have Obama being undermined from the left, from the anti-war contingent. Even the Black Caucus says they're fed up and they'd be marching on the White House if it weren't for the fact that they simply sort of identify with Obama. But why identify with the puppet when the whole system is ruined, Lew? And how can Ron Paul let the world know he's got the answers and the rest are just part of the same system?
I think here's the conundrum. Ron, of course, as you say, has immense believability on the economy. Not only because he's a genius, by the way, and a great economist, even though he doesn't have his degrees in medicine versus economics. He is a real economist, and he can speak with such authority and such truth. And of course, he predicted everything. So this is his strength. On the other hand, the Republican Party is a party of bloodthirsty murderers, cheerleaders. I mean, the kind of people who sat in the Roman Colosseum and cheered the gladiators slicing each other up. So I must say that's the way I think of most Republicans, and in fact, most Tea Party people. So here's the question: can people's concern about the economy, fear about the economy? We all realize instinctively we're in a depression, that our kids and our grandkids are going to be worse off than we are. So if people will put that first, then I think this is very doable, because not only because of Ron's tremendous stature, but because of what the government keeps doing to the economy and the Fed. They're making us poorer and poorer. So I think it's a race. It's a race. Will these people are not going to agree with Jesus Christ that blessed are the peacemakers. I don't, especially the Christian right and so forth. I don't see that happening. But will they put that at a second issue and not worry about America dominating the globe and running every country and killing people by the carload? Will they put their desire for that kind of killing all Muslims and so forth? Will they put their desire for blood below their desire to have some kind of standard of living for themselves and their family? I think that is the key. Ron is capable of doing it, but the unfortunate ally he's got in this is how the government is stamping on the economy. The more they talk about rate, we're already exactly in the situation that was true in the 1930s. Professor Robert Higgs talks about this, what was called regime uncertainty. People stopped investing. Businessmen stopped hiring because they never knew what Roosevelt was going to do. Was he going to just be like a communist and confiscate everything, or like Hitler or whatever? Nobody knew what he was going to do. And it wasn't until after the war that the economy came back with a bang, by the way, when the government was drastically cut, military spending was drastically cut. And in 1946, we had the greatest year of economic growth in American history by far, 30% economic growth in 1 year. Probably that understates it. An unbelievable explosion of prosperity. So that's what can happen. We don't have to be sentenced to poverty. We don't have to be sentenced to having our kids worrying about what's going to happen to our kids and our grandkids and great-grandkids and so forth. Because the economy is getting worse, Ron Paul not only has the diagnosis about what went wrong, he's got the cure. So that is, I think, where possible victory lies. We just have to see if we can all help him bring that about.
Okay, we're coming up on the break. Thank you so much for joining us. LewRockwell.com. Lots of great coverage there. Stay with us, too.